Hey guys, my name is Nate, and I'm the Otter Outdoorsman. And this is a special episode of Know Your Resources, where I'm going to go over a very abundant resource here in the Northeast. Snow. Now, every winter, all throughout the world, snow falls, especially in the north. The amount you get really depends on your region, but in the Northeast, we can have anywhere from, a foot on the ground to 2 or 3 feet. Right now, we have a good abundance of it. Now, generally, snow consists about 10 to 20% water, depending on the temperature of it and how long it's been sitting there, and its density. So if you're looking at snow for a source of water, you're going to have to harvest a good amount of it in order to gain enough drinking water. Generally, that can be done over almost any heat source, including yourself, to a fire. And as the snow melts, you're going to have to add more to the container you're melting it in, because you're not going to have a full container if you have a full container of snow. Now, snow isn't just useful for water. It has a huge abundance of uses, including what I'm using it for right now, which is a shelter. I'm using what's typically known as a trench shelter right now to get myself out of the wind, which today's a somewhat windy day, and it's actually pretty neutral right here. It's actually kind of warm right here, relatively speaking. Snow has many different types of shelter uses. In some areas you can make igloos. My area, that's generally not true. You need a specific consistency, and in my area it's either too wet or too powdery to make an igloo. But you can make other types of shelters. You can make a trench shelter like this one I have here, but you can also make things like a snow cave. Now, the snow cave would basically be a massive mound of snow, or you find a location that has a huge amount of snow, and you carve it out to make a shelter within. A lot of times as a kid, us in the neighborhood that I grew up in, we used to actually dig them into the plow walls for fun. But you can also use it to enhance your shelters. When I went out camping previously, we had some drafts in our tarp shelter we had set up, so I shored them up with snow on the outside to block the wind, and it actually did basically remove the drafts we had. I'll put over a picture or a clip over this video. Now, you can also use it for other types of shelters where you can just build up walls and have a fire in the center, and it kind of keeps in the heat. But you got to remember also, as the shelter warms up, it will slowly start to melt. But not as quick as most people would think. Snow is very insulating. As I said, water, it's primarily 10% water, which means the rest of it is air. Now, if you ever look at a snowflake, you'll see it's very crystalline in structure. Now, with that crystal structure, what you'll see is a lot of air will get trapped between those crystals, which makes snow light and fluffy. And that is why snow shelters have a tendency of being pretty insulating. And snow itself can be insulating, even though it is cold. Also, some of the other benefits of it is that, as I said, it helps block out the wind. Now, outside of shelter, there's some other uses for it. Now, one thing I actually have used it for in the past is actually it can be used as a cold compress. I'm accident prone. People who know me know that most trips I tend to come home with some form of injury, whether it's a small scrape or I'm in a sling for a few weeks. A good anecdote would be when I was in Scouts, we went on a snowboarding trip, and on that trip, probably about my second run, I cut the board just wrong because I was learning to snowboard, and I went flying about 15 feet down the mountain. Well, sliding more often fell. And I ended up kind of spraining / fracturing my elbow. So I was actually in a sling for about 6 weeks. But one of the ways we treated it while we were at the ski resort was we had a Ziploc bag filled with snow and put up against my elbow. Now, if you injure yourself, I mean, yeah, you're cold out here, but you should still put a cold compress on something if it is about to bruise and to reduce swelling. So, snow actually does have first aid uses. Also, some other tricks is if you're moving a lot, you're moving and grooving, and you're starting to heat up and sweat while you're out for a hike, when you're out, you really don't want to sweat, especially because, you know, that saying, you sweat, you die, or, you know, basically the wind blows by you and hits your sweat. Well, a way to reduce your core temperature is to eat snow. Generally what you'd want to do is you want to take it, if the snow was going to cooperate with me here, is you want to put it into a small ball and put it past your mouth. This stuff's too powdery for me to really demonstrate it that well. There we go. So what you can do is you can... Yeah, it is way too powdery for this. But normally what you can do is you can squeeze it up into a small ball, pass it, put it past your lips so it doesn't chap it, warm it up in your mouth, then swallow it. I wouldn't recommend that unless you are constantly moving. If you're sitting down like I am right now, it can reduce your core temperature. But on the upside, I have used it while either shoveling or hiking as a way of cooling myself down because I'm insulated. I'm layered, and instead of taking off layers, I can do that so I can kind of save a little bit of time. But you do run the risk. While I have done it many times, I've also occasionally made my tongue go numb for a little while. I have also chapped my lips. So it's one of those things of its risk versus reward. Now, while snow is very useful, it also has a lot of dangers. Look at, while I am laying on it, I'm also sitting on something to insulate myself from the ground. Liquids pull heat away from your body 75% times faster than air. So it will, by touching it, it will slowly reduce your temperature. I am leaning back on snow and my legs are on it, so I am starting to get a little cold. That is one of the major inherent dangers. Now, when I said there's multiple different types of snow, there's the fluffy powdery stuff and the kind of heavy wet stuff. The fluffy powdery stuff isn't bad. You generally can, you know, brush it off. But on occasion, one thing it can do is it will get everywhere, and like I've had it get into my pockets and stuff, and it will melt, and then some of your clothes gets wet. The same thing goes for wet snow. It can be pretty heavy, and at that same time it'll be wet, and if it melts on your clothes, I've actually had pants freeze on me, solid. And I've also had snow that froze my pants melt from my body heat and run down my leg into my boots. And I can tell you this, water in your boots while you're trekking through the snow is quite miserable. I've actually almost lost feeling in my toes from that. But that was also because I wasn't, as I was post-holing into the ground, I wasn't wearing snowshoes. Snow would also get up into my leg and actually would sit on top of my boot and melt into my boots. And I ended up getting a good amount of water in my boots, and it was miserable, I can tell you that. That's why I also no longer wear cotton socks in the winter. Some of the other inherent dangers is, as I was shoveling this, you have to remember to not lift much when you're moving it, whether it be with a makeshift shovel or an actual shovel like I brought with me. If you lift up too much, if you have any back problems, you can, or even if you don't, you can actually throw out your back by shoveling, and which is why they generally advise you do it in layers. You do the top, middle, and the bottom as you shovel. So you kind of, especially if it's heavy snow, because I have a bad back. I have a couple issues with my spine, and shoveling is actually pretty painful for me on occasion. So I have to do it in those layers, and I have to be careful while snowing. So moving your snow can be pretty dangerous. Now, walking through it, there's a lot of people advise you using snow skis, or cross-country skis or snowshoes. And these allow for a more efficient movement through the snow. Now, deep snow, especially that we have up here in New England, is tough to move through without any of those, because what you'll do is what it's called post-holing, where you'll step into the snow and you'll punch in. And that takes a lot of energy. I was post-holing to where I was making the shelter, and I actually almost threw out one of my knees. Now, I can tell you this though, if you're looking for a really good leg workout, post-holing is your friend. After a trip where I post-holed the entire time, I pretty much the next day had very sore glutes and legs, but it felt like one of the best workouts I'd ever gotten. So having snowshoes which allow you to kind of walk on top of snow, and having cross-country skis, so I've never cross-country skied, allows you to kind of slide across it. Having those things will help you move across the snow as well. So this has been just a bit of information on snow, and to see that while it can be a hindrance, it can also be a benefit, especially right now in the winter. So if you can think of any other uses for snow, or think of anything that I forgot, feel free to let me know. I always like learning new skills and learning new uses for resources. But remember, knowing your resources, and that's half the battle. My name is Nate, the Otter Outdoorsman. You have a good day. Let me tell you a secret. It may look like I'm out in the woods. This is actually my backyard. There's so much snow here. So much snow.